Hello, and welcome to another episode of whatever this is. My name is Ben. My name is Ben, and today we are talking about something that has come up a lot recently in my clients and in my own life. Which is, of course, how to stay on top of your nutrition goals during wedding season. I am very, very excited to say that I'm going to my cousin's wedding this weekend. Really looking forward to it. And have been talking about weddings quite a bit. Spooky. Talking about weddings quite a bit with my clients over the last few weeks because it's wedding season. And for those of you that, don't know, Toronto really, I would say personally, didn't really come out of the pandemic lockdown mindset until like this year. Last year, it was like people were testing the waters, all that kind of stuff. This year, people are like, all right, we're not dying from this anymore, right? And don't get me wrong, there are certain populations that are still vulnerable. COVID's still very much a thing. I think I might have had it a few weeks ago. I'm not too sure. But, we're at the point now where we're like, all right, no one's going to die. We're better. People are vaccinated, that kind of stuff. So, lo and behold, there's a lot of people getting married now. It's an increased surge of it. My cousin's one of those lucky people. Him and his fiance, which will be wife as of this weekend. Very much looking forward to it. But it's a good talking point because a lot of people have a lot of misinformation around nutrition plans and goals for wedding and all that kind of stuff, which is, really, really tricky because there's a lot of like well-intentioned things, as there usually is for like everything. There's a lot of well-intentioned things out there, but to me, I see a lot of these well-intentioned things being like pure sabotage when it comes to their nutrition goals and things of that matter, right? Whether or not they're sticking on top of their goals, portion control, whatever it might be that individual client is working on. Weddings tend to be a little bit hard and dysregulating for a lot of people for multiple different reasons. So today we're going to talk about multiple nutrition goals and strategies for wedding season while I prepare dinner for myself. Now, if you're following me on Instagram, which you all should, you would have seen a teaser photo that I posted about what I'm cooking tonight for dinner. So we're going to go over some of the ingredients first, then we're going to talk about the nutrition stuff for wedding season and all that kind of stuff. A couple of good talking points that have like worked together and seeing what it is. But before we get into the actual meat of this whole stream, we got to talk about what I'm cooking tonight for dinner. And that is one of my favorite dishes, dan dan mein. Dan dan mein, for those of you that don't know, is a soupless noodle dish from Chinese culture, because, I'm Chinese. And I think like a lot of Asia has different kind of iterations of dan dan mein, right? The Japanese have a tantan ramen dish, which is delicious. One of my favorites in the city is from Ishin, and all that kind of stuff. But they have that, and then there's a ton of different versions of it. So I'm making the Chinese version today, which features a couple of different ingredients that I guess I have to talk about because, not a lot of people are familiar with it. The first one I'm going to talk about is this, which is pickled mustard greens. Now, pickled mustard greens are cabbage, basically, that's been pickled for quite some time. These are packaged and really, really easy to use. So what I'm going to do is use this today for the nutrition. It's going to give the meat dish a lot of flavor and all that kind of stuff. And I'm also going to be using an ingredient that I've used in the past before, but I don't think I've talked too much about, which is Szechuan peppercorns. Szechuan peppercorns give a unique type of spice hit to the dish. It is a spice that in Chinese it's called mala, and it's numbing. It's a numbing kind of sensation on your tongue and your senses and all that kind of stuff. It's not the typical kind of spice that jalapeno would hit you with, right? So really, really love this flavor. These are the two unique kind of things that are featured in this recipe. Of course, I'm a dietitian, so we're going to put some vegetables in the dish as well. But before and while I'm talking about the wedding nutrition stuff, we're going to start marinating the meat. Now, the meat that we're using today is lean ground pork. Now, as you all know, I'm making this series from the perspective of how to have. I don't want to say cheap, but yeah, fundamentally it's just cheap. Lower cost dishes that are accessible to a lot more people, and featuring pork as that primary food group. The primary meat today because it's nice and cheap. Right now, this lean ground pork comes from Costco and was on sale this week. So, of course, we have a fresh roll. We're not going to use the whole thing. We're going to use half of it, and then we're going to freeze the rest of it, make sure there's no food waste and all that kind of stuff, and then I don't get bored of this dish. So let's get started on that real quick. How I'm going to do that is basically just get this meat marinated and I got to chop this up too. I haven't chopped it up yet, so I can just do that. But where's my chopping board? This dish is really good because there's not a lot of cooking involved in this dish. There's like minimal amounts of cooking and everything like that. Now, apparently, according to some of the videos I've watched on this dish, dan mein was made originally as a soupless noodle because, of course, this is, Chinese street food after all, which is just, it's delicious. That's why we're cooking it. And the street noodle vendors didn't want to carry around soup because it was really heavy, right? They'd have to carry around soup on their back with all that kind of stuff and then serve people as they were walking around. It wasn't the vibe. It wasn't what they wanted to do. So basically what ended up happening is they created a soupless version of this noodle dish, and we have dan mein. Dan mein is I will say this is not the official recipe today, and like I've said before multiple times, I'm not really here to do like authentic recipes. I'm here to do like updated modern recipes and all that kind of stuff in order to kind of make it a little bit more realistic for everyone, and then get them to look at their flavors a little bit differently, right? So that's what dan mein is that it's using, actually, believe it or not, traditionally it should be using tahini, which is should be used from tahini, which is made from sesame seeds, but I don't have any tahini right now, and of course Chinese tahini is just regular tahini, but that has the sesames roasted before the actual tahining process. That's not an actual word. Please don't quote me on that. But basically, how they make nut butters is how they're going to do it. So they kind of roast the sesames first, and then they create the tahini. So I'm not using that today because conveniently I don't have any, and I didn't want to go to the grocery store today just to get some tahini. So what I'm going to use is actually peanut butter. Just a regular Kraft smooth peanut butter is going to be used for this dish, and it's going to be really delicious. So right now I'm just chopping up the garlic, and to get the marinated ready for the pork, and then let that sit aside for about 15 minutes until I pan fry that up and then cook up the noodles. But today we are talking much more about the nutrition side of things for the wedding season. So welcome in for those that are tuning in. Hope your workday was good. Hope your long weekend was good if you're Canadian. And of course, for the American watchers, obviously tomorrow is Freedom Day for you. So, enjoy yourselves, and maybe a couple of these rules or guidelines, I should say, will transfer over to American Independence Day, America Day, whatever you want to call it. But either way, very excited to have everyone here today and for me to talk about nutrition goals for the wedding season. So with that being said, let's establish one thing right off the bat. If you look at the bottom of the screen right now, here we see the thing of the section, that's it, that we're going to talk about, which is of course pre-event nutrition. Now, there's a lot of misinformation out there, obviously, and a lot of strategies that are well-intentioned, but of course one thing we have to remember is that the path to hell is paved with good intentions. In these kind of situations, a lot of people, what I hear a lot of clients talking about when they are getting ready for their weddings and their wedding season and all that kind of stuff, then they do something. Basically, they restrict their food, they restrict their nutrition, they starve themselves. That is no bueno. Don't recommend that whatsoever. And the reason why is because you paid attention to my past streams. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the reason why I heavily do not recommend anyone restrict their nutrition intake, save the calories, so to speak, or all that kind of stuff before the wedding, is because we want to understand what the body hormonally is doing when we kind of skip meals, and what ends up happening, and from a behavioral standpoint and from a hormonal standpoint, right? So from the hormonal standpoint, your body enters a state of basically starvation. Starvation mode is a little bit dramatic, obviously, but it just basically, it knows that something's wrong if it hasn't had nutrition in a long time frame. So, for example, the people that starve themselves for a evening wedding and all that kind of stuff, and the dinners and all that, then what's ultimately happening is you're telling the body, hey, we have to overeat when we do get a chance to eat. And what ends up happening is, as well-intentioned as it is for them to save their calories, what ends up happening is people end up overeating. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I promise you that's what happens. So that's why I don't recommend starving yourself throughout the day, because it's just not effective and it doesn't work. So that being said, try not to do that. What's going in the bowl right now is we have half the thing of pork from Costco. We have some Shaoxing wine that we're going to use, and for the marinade, we're just going to throw a little bit in there, like 2 tablespoons or so. And then we have some dark soy sauce and regular soy sauce that we're going to throw in here. So regular soy sauce, again, about 2 tablespoons. And of course the dark soy sauce, another tablespoon, maybe 2. And what we're going to do is just take that, mix it all up, and let the flavor soak into the meat before we cook it on the pan. So that being said, just gonna take a spatula, mix it all up. Now you could mix this up with your hands and be hardcore, but I'm not gonna do that because, yeah, I don't want to do that. So pre-event fueling and all that kind of stuff. So I will say one thing: with all the nutrition misinformation out there, there's usually a half-truth in the statement that people are making that is very, very solid logic, but poor execution because they don't know enough about the human body, right? In the sense of saving your calories, that actually kind of makes sense because it is formally recognizing that the food served at social events will likely have a higher caloric content. It'll be more delicious, heavier sodium, all that kind of stuff. So to be able to properly redistribute your calories actually makes a whole lot of sense. But what doesn't make sense is the math when you combine it with the hormonal properties. Again, when you skip meals, what ends up happening is your hormonal system ends up getting overly hungry. And then when you eat, depending on the speed at which you eat, which is going to come up again later on in this discussion, this stream, depending on the speed at which you eat, what will end up happening is typically people will overeat, fulfilling the prophecy of like, oh yeah, I didn't want to overeat at the wedding, so I starved myself the entire day. And then, lo and behold, they end up overeating no matter what they can do because their body is, of course, responding. And when you're in an environment that is very stimulating, very happy, very anxious for a lot of people for multiple different reasons, our emotions kind of kick in. And those emotions end up forcing us to actually overeat for multiple different reasons. So the idea there of saving the calories makes sense. It makes logical, rational sense. However, from an execution standpoint, when we take into account what the body will do with the hormonal system, it doesn't work out quite the same way. So that is something I will say. But so how do we actually make room for those calories that are going to come at nighttime for whatever reason? Let's understand a couple of different things. We're not skipping meals. All right, skipping a meal is just grounds for disaster in that whole equation. So we're not going to do that. And the reason why we're not going to do that is because it forces our body to want to overeat later on at night when we're actually being served. And that's no bueno, right? Depending on what culture your wedding is from and all that kind of stuff, because that is an important talking point we're going to talk about later. You might be served very, very differently. You might be served buffet style, or you might be served a traditional Western French service style of wedding. So it really depends on all those kind of things. Now, if you starve yourself and it is a buffet style wedding, well, guess what? You're going to overeat, and you're going to choose a lot of the foods that are going to cause your blood sugars to fluctuate quite a bit. That is no good. Don't advise that whatsoever. So we want you to I tell people or tell clients to basically maintain the same meal timings they would normally follow throughout the day. And that is, of course, for everyone that is not new to the stream, breakfast within 1 to 2 hours of waking up, and meals and snacks separated by about 3 to 4 hours, depending on multiple different things, right? Whether or not you're part of the party or all that kind of stuff. I am not part of the wedding party, so I just need to show up in a suit, maybe, and just show up and have a good time, and with a gift, obviously. So do not skip meals. Maintain the regular meal timings you normally would have, which is breakfast within 1 to 2 hours of waking up, meals and snacks separated by 3 to 4 hours. Now, how are we going to practically still make space without causing a negative consequence to what we're ultimately doing for our bodies that day? So I tell people this all the time. There are different rates at which our body digests food, and different feelings of fullness, different satiety levels. The technical term is satiety, but of course, feeling of fullness will do for the purposes of this conversation. So different foods, different macronutrients specifically, have different satiety rates. So the different in satiety is measured in short-term duration, which is 1 to 2 hours after a meal, as well as long-term duration, which is 3 to 4 hours after a meal. We always want to be aiming for foods that are going to keep us full for the long term, so we don't have any blood sugar fluctuations or anything like that throughout the entire day. So we want to understand what those foods are and understand what the matrix is. The matrix, like I said, taking macronutrients into considerations, not specific types of food, are going to be your protein, your fats, your carbohydrates, and of course your fiber, vegetables, yada yada, all that kind of stuff. Now, protein is king of short and long-term satiety, which means your body will respond best to having protein in your system and keep you full for a longer period of time. That is the goal. So we're not cutting any kind of proteins out of your diet. In fact, I would actually tell people to increase protein the day of the wedding if they don't know, if they're worried about overeating at the dinner or overeating at the buffet or anything like that. And the reason why is because you're a lot less likely to overeat if you're already full a little bit, right? If you're not starving hungry. So we want to make sure that protein is a good, important part of your day, throughout the day, at breakfast, as well as lunch. And it depends on the format of the wedding, right? There's a lot of weird weddings, I will say, that I'm not the biggest fan of, in the situation of, for example, there will be people that have like, oh, we're going to do the church ceremony during the day, and then there's going to be a 5-hour interval block before we kind of get together for reception and weddings while they do their photos and all that kind of stuff. Don't love that. We'll be honest, do not love that. Go take your photos way ahead of time. Don't make your guests wait. Whatever. I don't know. I'm just a guy that talks a lot of crap on the internet. But if that's the situation you're in, then of course you want to make sure you have lunch planned. Maybe kind of get to know some people, being like, hey, we're going to go here for lunch or something like that. Really make sure you're not skipping your meals by getting back to the macronutrients and all that kind of stuff with it all. With the macronutrients, we have the protein, like I said, which is king of short and long-term satiety. So you're going to feel full with that protein. So focus more on protein throughout the rest of the day because it keeps you a baseline level of full that will prevent you from overeating at dinner time or whenever the meals are served. Then secondly, we want to acknowledge the role of fat in the body. Fat doesn't do much to keep you full short term, but it does excellent, amazing things to keep you full long term. So what ends up happening, and this is why a lot of people, when they have like high fat foods or a lot of fat in their meals, they will feel full for a long period of time, because fat breaks down slowly, releases slowly in the digestive system, forcing the body to digest the same meal over and over again. So fat, not so great short term, not so great long term. Carbs, terrible short term, terrible long term, right? So this is where I'm going to come back to in a little bit, but let's get to vegetables first. Vegetables are moderate short term, moderate long term. So what I tell people all the time is, if you have an event that day and you're worried about your nutrition, you're worried about your calories, you're worried about overeating and all that kind of stuff, you want to make your advantageous decision of cutting carbs down by about 50% at the surrounding meals. So in the situation, for myself, it's going to be, I'm cutting carbs out of breakfast, cutting them out of lunch, and then having them at dinner time. That is what I plan to do. That's what I tell a lot of clients to do. And then to have a snack before the actual dinner, or part of that. And the reason why I do that is because if carbs don't make you feel full, short, or long term, then of course they're the easiest to manipulate without the body kind of being suspicious. Like, just don't be suspicious, right? So in that situation, what I plan to do this weekend is have a good sized breakfast, have a good sized lunch, and luckily for me, my cousin is smart enough to begin the whole wedding thing around 6 o'clock, leading directly into dinner time, all that kind of stuff. Beautiful, fabulous, love it, big fan, thank you, Calvin. So we're going to do that. And it's going to be okay, because I would have actually made enough caloric space for my daily caloric allowance to allow myself to enjoy myself a little bit more at dinner time, include the desserts and all that kind of stuff, which we will talk about later. So with that being said, that's how we do it. But in a situation where you have a big chunk of time between the actual ceremony and the reception, then I would highly advise you to come prepared or think ahead of time. Where are you? Do you know any places nearby? Do a couple of Google search, plan ahead. What is the meal that you're going to have? The worst case scenario, have a good sized protein bar between, like, after the ceremony, at the church or whatever, wherever it is. And then while they're taking photos, while they're doing that kind of stuff, eat your food, eat your protein bar at the very, very minimum, and then kind of keep that 3 to 4 hour window going. That's what I really, really want to tell people, is basically you manipulate carbs more than anything else that day. So that being said, that's how we make space for people with caloric allowances that have caloric restrictions or whatever, with their complying with their nutrition goals. So again, to go over that again, do not skip meals. Just cut down the calorie allowance at that meal, specifically from carbohydrates. So follow like a keto-esque diet the day of, and then have your carbs at nighttime, and with the dinner and all that kind of stuff. The other thing too is I will remind people to maintain their hydration throughout the entire day, because if you're dehydrated, especially in the heat, you're more likely to not have your appetite signals just re-triggered, reanimated, all that kind of stuff that forces you to want to eat. So keep those kind of reactions in mind, right? The other thing, okay, the mic is working properly. The other thing too is that, yeah, hydration, eating properly, cutting your carbohydrates down. That's the best way to kind of make space for that kind of stuff. Now, officially, I'm going to tell you, hey, eat normally, do your thing, all that kind of stuff. But different people have different kind of anxiety levels when it comes to weddings and all that kind of stuff, right? For a lot of people, this could be practical. It could be like, hey, my dress is not going to fit. It could barely zip up or anything like that. Or, my tux barely fits and I don't want it to whatever. This is completely fine. It's completely understandable. I go through these kind of things too. I actually don't know if I'm going to fit into my suit. For this week, because I grew a little bit in terms of muscle mass size and all that kind of stuff. So, it is what it is. So that'll be addressed when we get to the time there. But either way, that is a big part of the plan in regards to what happens for wedding days, for the pre-event kind of eating. So kind of make sure you have your meals as normal. Cut down the carbohydrates before the actual wedding event. And I would always remind people to have a high protein snack before the actual dinner part. So, for example, if the wedding party, or if there are canopies or hors d'oeuvres being served, or snacks or anything like that, then of course aim for the higher protein snacks, or canopies, or hors d'oeuvres, because that's what's going to help you regulate your appetite a little bit better for the actual dinner aspect of it all. Now, that being said, the next part is very, very interesting, because of course you need to know the culture of the wedding that you're going to and how they're gonna have it, right? For myself this weekend, I actually don't know if this is going to be a traditional Chinese wedding or if it's going to be a Korean wedding, traditional Korean wedding, because my cousin is marrying someone who is Korean, and that does make it very, very interesting. If it was a very just like Chinese kind of thing, you kind of want to see what is going on with their meal. If they didn't say anything on the wedding invites or anything like that, more likely than not, it's a traditional Chinese banquet style dinner, which means you have like 10 to 12 courses served slowly over time and being served from the waiters and all that kind of stuff. Really, really good. One of my favorite ways of eating. We'll talk more about that. Then there are other cultures, for example, Indian weddings and all that kind of stuff, that have more of a buffet kind of service style there, where it's like, all right, we have too many people here. We're just going to open up a buffet. People are going to be able to serve themselves. That's where things get a little bit more complicated. And then you have your traditional kind of European, North American style weddings, where it's like, okay, and I find this to be one of the weirdest things, by the way. If you are in North American, European weddings, where it's like, hey, we got to RSVP and choose the meal we're gonna have 3 months ahead of time. Dude, like, I barely know what I want to eat like a day before I eat, all that kind of stuff. And I get it. It's for like, hey, ordering, planning the meal service for the kitchen, all that kind of stuff. Like, oh, are you gonna have the beef or the chicken or the fish or the vegetarian or whatever, that kind of stuff. I just personally find that to be a weird thing to make a decision about food so much in advance for the actual wedding, the day of the wedding and all that kind of stuff. But, I mean, I guess it works, because usually there are choices that are that will speak to people more than the other thing, right? Or just like, hey, this is what I don't want to eat. Either way, getting back to it. So, it's important to know what you're kind of in for the food side of things for the wedding, right? It's culturally relevant. In a Chinese banquet style wedding, what typically will happen is we'll have like 10 to 12 courses, depending on what you consider a course, starting with appetizers, steamed fish. We have a lot of those kind of things. And then, of course, the carbs are served at the very, very end, the fried rice and the noodles. That's a very, very specific reason. The noodles in itself served at the end of the meal is there because it is to resemble the long life, the long wedding, the long marriage that they're going to have, right? That's the symbolism behind noodles. The longer the noodle, the longer the birthday, the longer the wedding, all that kind of stuff, right? So if you know the culture in which you're going, then you're kind of, I guess, protected in a sense, where it is, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to be served all this food over a very long period of time. That's really, really important, because have you ever noticed that if you ever go to a fancy restaurant or anything like that, then you can have a lot of like, you can have the meal served over a slow period of time. This is your most ideal situation. You want to eat slowly, because you want the body to be able to break down foods. You don't want to overwhelm it. You don't want to overeat really, really quickly, all that kind of stuff. So that's the most ideal situation. You eat slow, and kind of the way everything is served for you is kind of managed like that. Now, if you're in a buffet situation or a North American / European kind of situation where the food is available at the same time, then of course we have a little bit more of a strategy to talk about. So that comes down to a buffet kind of style wedding, or meal service, or it comes down to a traditional French service kind of thing, where it's like, here's the food, we're going to serve table one all at once and all that kind of stuff, and it becomes this like extra kind of thing. If you have that, If you have the North American kind of thing, then that's where you get to time out the your I guess your high protein snack before the meal. And typically I will try to get people to have a high protein snack about 30 minutes before the meal. Now, the reason why is because this is related to hunger mechanisms or digestive mechanisms in the body. Predominantly leptin and ghrelin as the hormones. Leptin is the fullness hormone. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone. So basically what happens when you start eating is that your body will recognize that there's food coming in to your stomach, because it takes about 20 minutes for food to enter your mouth. You chew, you swallow, you do all that kind of stuff, and it starts hitting the small intestine. Once it hits the small intestine, it sends this feedback signal back to your brain. I believe it's your hypothalamus. And what it does is it tells your body to start increasing the leptin intake and leptin release and decreasing the ghrelin release. So ultimately what that means is it's a way for your body to say, hey, release more of the fullness hunger hormone, which is why I tell people have a high protein snack 30 minutes before the meal is served or before your appetizer is served or whatever it might be. And that typically helps regulate the meal a lot better and preventing people from eating too quickly. Because when you eat too quickly, guess what? You kind of are forcing the body to kind of deal with that a lot differently than if you're eating slow, right? So practice that mindfulness, all that kind of stuff. And go slow. Hold on 1 second. I am looking. Oh, there it is. Chili crisp. We need our chili crisp. So yeah, eat slowly. That's what we really, really want to do. And there we go. And when you eat slowly, that will allow you to basically control the amount of food that you're eating. Right? I mean, sounds like it makes sense, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people just they eat at one speed and they go really, really fast. So keep that in mind. We're using, so I'm for those of you curious right now, I'm making the actual sauce component of the dish. We're taking some garlic, chopped up garlic. We're taking the peanut butter. We're taking some chili crisp. We're taking the Szechuan pepper powder, and we're putting that in to kind of give us our sauce that we're going to mix in later with our noodles, and a little bit of extra water, a little bit of soup, that kind of thing. Now, the Szechuan peppercorn is really, really nice. Like I said, it provides a mala kind of spiciness to the dish, which is a numbing sensation on your tongue. It's really, really cool. I'm a big fan of it. And then we're just going to put some soy sauce in here as well. Alright, so we do all that kind of stuff, and then we mix it all up in the actual thing. I'm going to take a little bit of a whisk to kind of help me out. It distributes everything a little bit more evenly. So there's that, the pre-event stuff. Okay, so what are we talking about right now? Pre-event eating. Okay, oh, I should move the bottom of the thing to at the bottom, navigating the buffet. So if you're in a situation where the culture, the standard is delivery of the nutrition or the meal or the food in that particular culture, and the one that's coming up to me right now is Indian, like an Indian wedding typically is a buffet style service. The challenge with the buffet style service is, yes, you can eat whatever you want. That's a great, great thing. But it's harder to regulate, A, the speed at which you're eating, and B, the type of macronutrients that your breakdown that you're having, right, fundamentally. So this comes down to knowing what the dishes are, being able to identify what they are, and then making, I guess, good choices based on that. So I tell clients all the time, as long as you can identify a protein, a carb, and a vegetable, you will be okay in any of those kind of situations. Because what ends up happening is, if you can be like, oh, that naan or that biryani or that chapati or that dosa is carb, then great. You know what portion sizes you're aiming for the carb, right? If you want more, go for it. But you generally have a good idea of how to regulate that intake. Then you can identify what the proteins are and what the vegetables are. So in a buffet kind of style, it depends on what you're being served with. If you're being served with a dish, then I would always tell people to try to aim for that classic plate model kind of breakdown, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it. And I'll show you what the plate model looks like. So you would have half the plate of vegetables, a quarter of the plate of protein, and a quarter of the plate as carbohydrate. That's what you're ideally aiming for from a distribution standpoint at minimum if you're worried about that kind of thing, right? So again, half the plate as vegetables, a quarter as protein, and a quarter as carbohydrate, no matter what it is you're being served from the buffet style side of things. Now, not everyone eats like that or has that kind of wedding, so we have to keep that in mind because there's different wedding cultures, different kind of practices at the wedding, all that kind of stuff. So it's best to know a little bit more of that kind of stuff beforehand, but you know, some people, it's just a learning experience for them, and that's cool too. I really, really like that. But like I said, tomorrow, I hope it's the Chinese banquet style. I mean, not tomorrow, but on Saturday is the wedding. And I hope it's Chinese banquet style because I haven't had Chinese banquet food in quite some time. It's one of my favorite kind of things. It's so epic. It's such a big thing. And if you follow me on Instagram, I'm going to be posting about the whole wedding throughout the entire day. So keep that in mind. Follow me on Insta. The handle's down below. See you there. I'll show you the wedding stuff, the nutrition for the wedding stuff. So, okay. Just washing some of the vegetables that I'm going to have with this meal, and which are going to be one of the easier things to cook. Now, I'm going to do this, and then basically have two things blended. Okay. So that is the navigating the buffet side of things. I think that's very, very important to discuss. And let me know, are there any questions right now about nutrition and weddings and different cultures and their practices when it comes with food? I mean, I'm here talking about it, so, you know, ask your questions, do your thing, you know? Good time. By the way, Pride is over. Which kind of sucks because Pride is always a really, really cool time of the year. How was everyone's Pride? You know, was it good? Did you get to go to the parades and all that kind of stuff? I didn't do it because I'm not the biggest fan of crowds anymore. So, you know, I kind of did an old person, like, grumpy thing and stayed home. So, you know, I did that. But I hope everyone else out there had a really, really good, safe, and fun Pride because that's what it should be all about. But, yeah. Putting that there, and that away. Don't need those things anymore. Now, all right, beautiful. So, that's basically what we got for the buffet style thing. Now, one thing I will say about buffet style is the challenge with buffet style is you can go up as much as you want, and that's good because it's easy for organization, it's easy for planning. However, it's difficult for the nutrition practices of the individual. So if you're looking to, aside from using the plate model kind of thing, if you're being served on a plate, which usually you are in a buffet situation, what you want to keep in mind is timing between going up. If you're hungry, go up and eat some more, but if you're not and you're just finding yourself overeating and out of control, then what we want to do is introduce the element of time. Like I was telling you about with the Chinese banquet style weddings, what typically happens is you're getting served like 10 to 12 courses over the course of, like, let's say 2 to 3 hours. So taking 2 to 3 hours to eat one meal actually works out quite well, because what ends up happening again is, from a digestive standpoint, your body can actually start to digest foods properly if you're not going too fast, right? So this is the kind of concept that we want to talk to you that I I tell people when they go to weddings with a buffet style kind of food service layout is that, hey, what we can get you to do, get you to do basically is slow down your eating with some mindfulness, nutrition practices, and all that kind of stuff. Now, basically, what that means is make sure you eat your plate as slowly as possible. For people that eat fast, that might be 10 minutes is what I generally aim to get people to do. So during that meal, during that plate or whatever they're eating, take about 10 minutes before you get back up and go to the buffet and all that kind of stuff. So why 10 minutes? Well, that allows the body to actually process, understand what's going on with the digestive system, understand that food's coming in, so you're just not cramming food down there, right? If you eat too fast, people tend to overeat because their blood sugars are going wild, all that kind of stuff. We don't want that. We want to stay away from that kind of stuff. So eat slowly and drink water, hydrate with the meal, because one thing that is really, really cool about the body is that it could do a lot of amazing things. It could grow a human being. It could breastfeed that human being. It could digest lots of food, yada, yada, all that kind of stuff. What it doesn't do well is regulate thirst. So if you are under drinking your hydration, you're not drinking enough fluids, it's very likely your body will re-trigger your appetite to try to get you to eat more in order to get more fluids from the food choices that you're making, but also from the oh God, what is it? Yeah, it will just reactivate your appetite. So make sure you're well hydrated through that entire meal. And what I say to people is if you're having trouble slowing down, try to take a bite, drink a little bit of water between eating that will hydrate and slow you down at the same time before you go back for the next dish, right? It's about slowing down. It's about making sure that you're enjoying the moment, that kind of thing. I will talk about mindfulness eating at a different kind of stream, but for now, that's basically the gist of it. Slow down when you're eating and take about 10 minutes before you go back up to eat some more, right? And stay hydrated throughout that meal. Best tips I can give you right now for a generic situation. And again, these aren't recommendations for you to actually follow. It's just considerations for how you want to change your behaviors in regards to nutrition if you also identify with some of these issues or have some anxiety around these kind of things, right? Which brings me to my next thing is let's talk about alcohol for a little bit. Alcohol, there it is. All right. By the way, with this discussion with alcohol, I don't plan to spend too much time on it because I actually talked about alcohol quite a bit previously with alcohol and nutrition and sports nutrition. So I don't plan to talk about all that kind of stuff all over again. But what I will say with alcohol is that if you are a big drinker or anything like that, you want to consider the type of alcohol that you're drinking, what it's going to do to your body, all that kind of stuff. So go watch that stream to kind of see what information you can gather from your alcohol choices. I myself do not drink that much anymore. I do not like drinking that much anymore, but I do anticipate having a few like shots and all that kind of stuff. It's my cousin, right? It's my cousin. So I do anticipate a little bit of alcohol, but know how the alcohol is going to affect you. It adds unnecessary calories. It is dysregulating, and that's a very, very important thing because if you have a lot of anxiety, because it's one of those situations where not a lot of people talk about the anxiety that a wedding can bring, but it depends who you're sitting with, if you know the people, whether or not you have to make boring small talk or anything like that, or if you're lucky enough to know the rest of the people at the dining table, right? Weddings are weird because it's like a blind date. You kind of have to follow for like no reason whatsoever with the people eating at your dinner. And that could be great and all that kind of stuff. But of course, it can be very anxiety producing for a lot of people. So alcohol will only make that worse. Try to take that into consideration with like how much you're planning to drink, slow down, hydrate, and all that kind of stuff. But alcohol certainly can be a problem that could make the anxiety worse. It could dysregulate you more and all that kind of stuff. And especially in Canada too, because we have cannabis. that is fully legal, you want to be fully aware of how that cannabis is going to affect you. Now, believe it or not, and I'm going to have to do a stream focusing on nutrition and cannabis intake at some point in time, but believe it or not, the research actually shows that cannabis users eat less. Not eat less, have a lower blood sugar response when eating the same amount of food when compared to a non-cannabis user at the same meal, right? Very, very interesting. So it's kind of like the cannabis, the CBD, I'm guessing, buffers that response a little bit. And it helps buffer the blood sugar response there too. And, fun fact, the research has also shown that cannabis users on average have a lower BMI than non-cannabis users. So think about that for a second. For everyone that's like in the nutrition world being like, oh, what about the munchies? What about that? I'm like, yeah, this is why I say that nutrition and dietetics itself doesn't have as much evidence as they're boasting they have, right? They're just kind of going off what their biases are for the most part, and usually those biases are based on irrational fears more than anything else. So, cannabis has been thrown under the rug for a lot of different reasons, but it's a reality that we have to take into consideration, especially in Canada, because it's legal for recreational use, and there will be people smoking or consuming cannabis products at these kind of weddings. So you want to keep that in mind. It might actually be beneficial for you. It might not. Who knows? We're going to have to do a stream about that once I take a bigger look into the nutrition research in cannabis. But alcohol and cannabis, all those kind of things, the reality is they're very likely to inhibit or change up your anxiety and affect your anxiety and dysregulate you, forcing you to either nervously eat a little bit more than you'd want to. And we just kind of want to make sure that we call that in and be like, hey, do you want to do the majority of your drinking after the meal or before the meal or anything like that, right? Again, personally, I'm not that much of a drinker anymore. I find it such a huge turnoff to drink. I don't like drinking. So, it's this big thing now. It's like, okay, well, am I going to have some wine for a toast, a beer, a shot, whatever? Probably de-emphasizing that as much as possible. But alcohol is a very, very real thing for some people. And I will say one thing, too. If you're the type of person that gets absolutely trashed at a wedding, because, come on, you're being a dummy. Because you're ruining someone's day by being that level of inebriated and that level of drunk. So keep your shit together. Focus like later on or something like that. But like, God, don't drink that much at a wedding. It's just not cool. Either way, I am starting to heat up the pans for the meat. It's nice and marinated again. What went in here was some soy sauce, some Shaoxing wine, some garlic, and that's about it. So I'm just going to pan fry this up right now and, and then put the pickled mustard greens in with the pork after it's done the majority of its cooking, because we don't want to overcook this too much, right? So keep that in mind. And then we're going to boil the noodles. And then we also have some yu choy available. Now, yu choy is not a big part of this dish, but I'm a dietitian at the end of the day, and I do like eating vegetables because they're good for you and that they're tasty. I personally like this one the most. So we're going to serve vegetables with this dan dan mi. Deal with it. Yeah. That's what we're going to do. All right. That being said, let's move on to our next thing, which is, of course, desserts. A topic I'm a big fan of. Desserts! At the bottom. At the bottom of the thing. Boom, right there. Desserts. All right. Desserts. You can be a fan, you can not, you can take them, you can leave them. It's up to you. But there usually is, like, at least at the very, very minimum, like, wedding cake being served at the wedding. And then, of course, if you're lucky, there's a dessert table. Now, when it comes down to desserts and all this kind of stuff, this is why I think it's important to have your blood sugars well managed, eating properly, having more focus on emphasis on the protein choices at the meal. Because what ends up happening is with desserts, of course, high in sugar, high in carbohydrates, coming at the end of your meal is going to spike you up, drop you down. Now, this depends on multiple different things. I've seen a lot of people talk about like, hey, dessert's okay as long as you're dancing afterwards. And I'm like, all right, cool, yes, sure, theoretically makes sense. However, those people are really underestimating, or overestimating, I should say, the amount of calories that are burned during a dance routine or something like that, right? Like, how many calories are you really burning doing the YMCA? Gotta be, like, it's not that much. It's the friggin' YMCA. It's not that many calories. So I'm just moving things over right now. And we're good, because we're about to start cooking some of this stuff. Anyways, so that being said, we want to make sure that you have the dessert that you want to have. And because I used to be a pastry chef, I'm a big fan of people enjoying desserts, right? You got to ask yourself, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to over restrict? Do you want to have dessert? All that kind of stuff. Make those decisions and of course follow through with it. But I will say, in these kind of social events and all that kind of stuff, have the cake. Have the cake. It's fine. But if you don't want it for whatever reason, let's say you have diabetes and you're worried about blood sugars and all that kind of stuff, obviously do your testing, do all that kind of stuff. But it's a situation where I'm like, just eat the friggin' dessert. As long as you're eating a proper meal, it is very important to figure that part out, because if you're eating the proper meal, then your body's response to dessert is going to be a lot different. And again, you don't really have that much control over it, because it really does depend on when they serve dessert and whether or not there's a dessert table or a buffet table at the end of the night. That's been a thing that's really, really popular, that people have like, oh, this is my mac and cheese buffet at the end of the evening, right? And all that kind of stuff. Great, cool ideas, but of course, you got to think about what you're doing and what you're eating and all that kind of stuff. But right now, like I said earlier, focus on eating properly during the day, and then at nighttime you have the ability to kind of loosen up a little bit more, enjoy the social situation, because you don't want to be restrictive, right? You're limiting yourself in that way, and that's not fun. That's not good, and that's a red flag to me when it comes down to like eating behaviors and beliefs and all that kind of stuff. So it's best if you can enjoy some of the cake, but I get it, sometimes they choose like bad cake, or they serve cupcakes. If they serve cupcakes, I'm not touching that. Like, I don't know why that was a thing of like, oh, wedding cupcakes are a popular thing. I'm like, okay, it's gross. It's kind of weird. I had one wedding one time where they served donuts. Big fan of that decision. Loved it. Was so happy. But yeah, your boy hates cupcakes. So, it is what it is. So, that being said, just make sure you're making the food choices that you're proud of, that you want to have, and all that kind of stuff. That's what's important. So, again, very easy dish, because I spent the majority of the time just yammering away. So we want to keep that in mind. If I was just doing this regularly without camera and all that kind of stuff, I'm pretty sure the cooking would have been done by now already. So we are just cooking this meat up. When it's about 3/4 done, I'm going to throw in the mustard greens and let those cook, and be able to pull the whole dish together toward the end. So I've got my water boiling right now. Wonderful. And we're just going to take the noodles that I have, just regular old Asian noodles. We're just going to boil that up and then put that down. And then we're just going to strain it and then put it in a bowl and get ready to serve it. So yeah, so we have this going. I have this water pot boiling down here. That's for the yu choy, because all yu choy really needs is just a quick boil, and it's ready to go. I love it. It's one of my favorite vegetables of all time. because of how tasty it is and how easy it is to make it taste good. So, this is a dietitian that doesn't love every single vegetable. Like, if you serve me kale, I'm like pissed off. I'm really pissed off. I hate kale. It's not good. I don't know why it's so popular, but it is what it is. I just don't see it. And that might be a cultural thing. There's no kale in Chinese cooking or Chinese cuisine, and it really wasn't a part of my Canadian cuisine either growing up. So it's just like, I don't understand the whole obsession with kale. But a lot of people will be like, I'm a hater. I know my friend Andy the RD would say I'm probably a hater for kale, but that's all right. That's cool. We'll have to do a cook-off or something like that sometime. Yeah, so desserts. In summary, eat them, be in control, practice mindful eating, do all that kind of stuff. You're in control of your own decisions. As long as you stay in control of your own decisions, you're not going to regret what you had, right? I typically find that people only regret their decisions if they're not in control of their decisions. So always try to eat a proper dinner. Don't skip meals and all that kind of stuff, and you will be fine. You will be fine. All right, we're going to take the pickled mustard greens. Very, very delicious flavors. We're going to add them in. We're just going to let that all cook together with the juices. It's friggin' so delicious. And the pickled mustard greens, I wish I could show you what the flavors are like. Because it's pickled, yes, but it's not mustard flavored. It's hard to describe. I really don't know how to describe it, but it's really good. It's giving a lot of flavor, getting a little extra vegetable and all that kind of stuff. And it is just so delicious. And because it's fermented, it's adding some micro pro and prebiotics to the meal too, which is really, really cool, I think, is just how naturally some cultures can incorporate all these healthy aspects of cooking into a dish without really needing to plan around it, right? So I obviously talk a lot about pre and probiotics to my clients, to my athletes for digestive health and all that kind of stuff. And to me, it's great when you look at Asian cuisines and a lot of other cultures' cuisines and how much emphasis they already have on fermented foods and fermented vegetables and all that kind of stuff, which makes things fundamentally a lot easier to meet in terms of nutritional requirements, right? So, love that this dish has fermented pickled mustard greens. Actually delicious, and yeah, I absolutely love it. So, the noodles are nice and ready. I'm just going to take this out of here. I'm going to strain it in the sink, and we're going to let it we're going to dish that up in a little bit, but the noodles are done. This is going to be done in like a minute or two. Just want to make sure that cooks through all the way before I serve it, because there's still some pretty big chunks. And here's a pro tip too. You could definitely put a lid on this to ensure that the pork cooks to the internal temperature that it's supposed to. But right now it's pretty much done. It's 90% done. There's just a few bits that are just needing a little bit more heat, a little bit more time, and that's okay. That's fine. We got our water boiling now. We're going to take our yu choy and we're going to put that in. The stem side down first, because the stem's going to need a little bit more time to cook than the leaves will. So yeah, we'll just do that. Bring out our lovely tongs and make sure that it's cooking properly. Okay. How's everyone doing? We've got 4 people in chat right now. Welcome. Welcome in. If there's any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat below. We're talking about nutrition, strategies for eating well at weddings and all that kind of stuff today. while still being able to have fun. That's the vibe we're going for. Like I said, it was my cousin's wedding this weekend. Very excited for it. Very excited for him and Yvonne. Calvin, Yvonne, you guys are OGs. And Yvonne, welcome to the family. You are awesome. I've loved getting to know you over the past year. And, you know, can't wait for you to be at our family functions and all that kind of stuff a lot more. You're a great part of the family. And Calvin, you're a lucky, lucky dude, man. You're a lucky dude. But you know that already. That's why you put a ring on her. We got one chat. No, do we? Ah! There's always this mismatch of like what YouTube says and what the OBS streaming thing says, but it says someone chatted here, so look forward to that. Yes, Rose! So glad you're here. Hate kale, right? So overrated, totally sucks. Don't know why a lot of people made their personalities all about kale, but to them I say, you're boring. You're boring. Okay, so this is all done and cooked up. Obviously, we have a lot of protein here, so we're going to... That is going to obviously be my lunch for the next few days as well. And yeah, I'm not mad about it. I love this I love this dish so much. So, yeah. And welcome, Rose. I see you finally made a YouTube account and you got to chat. You got to type something in chat. So, thank you so much for being here. You're awesome. Can't wait to chat with you after the stream and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, this is what we're doing here. Okay. So that is ready. The meat's ready. The vegetables are almost ready, but we are definitely ready to plate up. So I'm going to get set up on the other side. I'm going to pull everyone back to the other side, and we're going to basically get ready to plate. All right. So, I will say traditionally, the recipe is served with the sauce at the bottom. I'm not going to do that because I don't think it's great for presentation reasons. But yeah, you should know that traditionally the sauce is at the bottom of the dish. So, take our tongs because the noodles are still pretty hot. Put that in here. Okay, so we got our noodles. Yes, it is a little bit dry and all that. I get that. But we're cooking, baby. Okay, so we have our noodles in the bowl. We have our pork done. We're going to take this and we're just going to scoop it into the bowl on one side. Take our double serving portion because we like the protein. We love the protein. Maybe 3. Put a little bit more on that. Okay. So we're going to let that be. We got our pork in here. Take our vegetables. Our vegetables are done. We are going to take a few strands of the choy and we're going to put that in. So this is my favorite vegetable, right? It's all you have to do is boil it and make sure you have a good sauce to put with it. So putting that in, give it a little bit of color and deliciousness. Not a natural word, but whatever, sue me. And then we are taking the sauce. So the sauce right here, that's what we're doing with it. and take this. Basically just spoon a good amount on top. And what you're supposed to do is mix that up with the noodles, with everything. And we're going to take a little bit of hot water. We're going to pour that in too, because, you know, it's going to mix together a little bit easier. So take that. Yeah, we're going to take a little bit of the hot water. Oh, here it is. And there you have it. A nice, easy, affordable, delicious meal. Dan mein. Okay. So, you know the drill. Take a photo for it with the gram. And you know, we're going to basically shut up shop in a little bit. But, yeah. Dah. Awesome! All right. Very cool. Okay. So, that's it. That's our meal. Like I said, I was yammering the whole time. So, you know, this could have been done much, much faster. But, you know, I got to stream to entertain. You know, that's what I do. I will say the last thing that I have prepared to talk about that I really wanted to focus on that I really wanted to focus on is the Rose, you're awesome. The last thing I wanted to talk about with nutrition and wedding strategies and all that kind of stuff is look at the bottom right there. Boundaries, okay? This is a very real thing depending on which culture you're at and all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm Chinese, and, you know, a lot of Asians don't know what the concept of boundaries are, and this is true for a lot of different cultures, right? You'll find that, especially the Chinese, in my experience, are very blunt and direct people, right? They will just straight up be like, oh, you gained weight, or you've lost weight, you look fat, or you do this kind of stuff. It's very blunt, right? And it's not coming from a body shaming standpoint. Of course, North Americans would call it that, but North Americans try to understand everything from their cultural perspective as opposed to understand a different cultural perspective. But one of the things we have to talk about, or I talk about a lot with my clients, is boundaries. How to practice asserting your boundaries at these kind of events, because let's be honest here, weddings can be very, very tough and anxiety producing for a lot of different people, right? You don't exactly know what kind of relationship that you have with some of your family members. It's not always good. I'm tired of people automatically being like, oh, but they're family. I'm like, listen, family is something you're born into, and it doesn't guarantee that you're going to be treated well, right? Normally, these people will treat their coworkers better than they will treat their own family members. And this is the thing that bothers me quite a bit, is that if you love your family member, maybe you should treat them with the same kind of etiquette that you would treat a coworker. And the only reason why they do that is because there is, from a coworker's perspective, there's consequences to what they say and what they act, right? HR will come in there and reinforce and all that kind of crap with what someone's saying about foods or moderate all that kind of stuff. We all know how I feel about HR. But my point is, in those kind of scenarios, that people will act differently when they are comfortable, especially from a cultural standpoint, right? In the Chinese culture, people are very, very blunt, very direct, and that might hurt a lot of people's feelings depending on where they come from. So for example, myself, I was born in Canada, but raised Chinese, like 100% raised Chinese, to the extent where I even had to do like ESL, English as a Second Language, even though I was born in Canada. And the reason why was because my family decided to raise me with Cantonese only until I entered public school, which junior kindergarten had to take ESL for the first 2 years. So into grade 1, I had to take ESL because, of course, that wasn't the language I was taught right from the beginning. So the challenge for me is, especially for those with dysphoria kind of childhoods and all that kind of stuff, being raised by one kind of culture but living and existing in another. I always say to people all the time, like, the reason why I'm so messed up is because Chinese culture and the Canadian cultures are diametrically opposed to each other. So it's kind of like, in order to survive at school, you have to be one way, and then you have the other way that you're being at home, and you don't really fully know who you are. But either way, once you figure that kind of stuff out, you start to be like, oh, I don't like this part of this culture. I don't like this part of this culture. I don't think this is okay. I think this is okay, yada, yada, all that kind of stuff. What my point is that if you understand the culture that you belong to or the culture that you're going to and all that kind of stuff, it shouldn't surprise you what happens. So, for example, if I was going to the wedding and all that kind of stuff and someone was going, oh, Ben's gained weight, he's fat now, and all that kind of stuff. That's just an example. I don't actually think that. That's probably not going to happen. But I'll give you an example because that likely does happen, right? They're like, oh, Ben's fat, he's gained weight, and all this kind of stuff. You have to practice and know what boundaries to assert beforehand, right? There's a lot of incongruencies, and this is what I talk with a lot of my clients of color. Oh my god, I just realized what that abbreviation is. Don't abbreviate that. Either way, my clients of color, we will talk a lot about their cultural expectations, cultural norms, and all that kind of stuff, right? And the Chinese aren't exactly the only people like that. For example, like a lot of my Italian friends, they'll be like, yeah, we have a lot of the same experiences. My grandma's very blunt, she's very direct, all yada yada, all that kind of stuff. So if you know you belong to that culture and you're anticipating something is going to happen, right? You want to understand how that's actually going to affect your emotional state around food, because especially if you're drinking. So one thing I say to people all the time that live the immigrant experience and the dysphoria that comes with it, a lot of times you don't know how to say no. You don't know how to say stop because it wasn't something that was ever done. Right? It's expected that, hey, respect your elders, do all this kind of stuff and all that. And they just get to walk all over you. Now, for myself, if that were to ever happen, if someone were to make a comment that I didn't like, I would just be like, say something like, oh, that wasn't very nice or whatever. But either way, you just got to learn how to practice your boundaries. And it's a lot easier to do that when you know when you have a script of how to assert yourself before the actual situation, right? A lot of times what I find a lot of people doing is that they will assume that they know how to deal with that situation because they practiced it a billion times in their head. But when it comes down to brass tacks and it's time, like someone's grandma is like, oh, this person's fat or whatever, and you're like, I don't know how to respond to that. It's because you're forcing yourself to think of the response in the situation, right? That's a high stakes game that nobody wants to play. No one should be playing. So if you're belonging to a culture like I do that is very blunt, very direct, and very not mindful of your feelings about how things are going to be received when they say them, you have to have some responses locked and loaded and how you're going to take care of yourself. So let's say in that scenario where someone's grandma says like, oh, this person's fat, like all this kind of stuff, and they're not body shaming you, they're just kind of making those observations, then you want to be like, thank you very much. Like, be polite, but shut them down at the same time. I could have picked a better dress, something like that. I don't know. Even myself, when people make comments on my body, I really, really quickly deflect or deter the conversation and do something else to make sure that the spotlight's not on me, right? Because believe it or not, I hate when people talk about my body. It's so weird because it's so invasive and they feel like they have the right to just because I'm not overweight or whatever it is. And just like, oh, come on, this is just, it makes me feel uncomfortable, right? My ex and her mom did that a lot. They will just objectify me and talk about me right in front of me. And I'm like, this is not okay. And you don't even belong to my culture. So why am I taking this from you? Either way, the idea here is if you are planning to, let's say, not drink a lot of alcohol, when your family has been traditionally big drinkers and all that kind of stuff, and you want to not do that, have some stock responses locked and loaded so that you're not thinking of something on the spot, right? So, for example, if you're trying to portion control, you're trying not to overeat, you don't have to explain your whole situation to everyone, because what that will do is make you feel more uncomfortable. Because typically what that does is shines a spotlight on you, and it makes it so that you're really, really, you feel exposed. That's not a good feeling. So what I say to people in those kind of situations is, if someone makes a comment on the food choices you're making at the buffet, being like, oh, that's a lot of vegetables, respond with something positive, being like, yeah, these vegetables are really, really tasty. They chose a really good menu and all that kind of stuff, right? If someone's like, hey, have you had the food item that you're not supposed to, you want to control your intake of? Let's say you want to control how much carbs you're eating at that particular meal. You might be like, yeah, I had a little. It wasn't that great. I didn't love it. I love this way more, right? It's about positively asserting your own boundaries, deflecting from it without offending someone, right? Because, especially in like a Chinese culture situation where you have like different hierarchies in the family, if you talk back in that situation, it's very uncomfortable, because, you could be really, really have a lot of negative kind of connotations. You could be gossiped about for ages after that. So you want to be able to deflect, and you want to be able to practice saying no in a way that makes sense, right? So it's just like, hey, Ben, let's have some shots. It's like, oh, no, I've had enough, like, all this kind of stuff. I'm not feeling too well. You want to be able to assert yourself, say no, and if they're coming at you, they're putting more pressure with you, then unfortunately, you're just going to have to avoid them the rest of the night. Like, if I am put in a situation where I have to drink heavily at this wedding, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm going to probably, disappear for a little bit and go chat with other people that aren't drinking quite so much, and have that kind of stuff. It's good to have these strategies, because these weddings, these kind of situations, they are very, very triggering and activating for a lot of different people, right? There's a lot of hyper arousal, a lot of stimulation going on, and that makes it so that it's easier to overeat. So, and if you're trying to prevent that from happening, then be aware of these things. Have some locked and loaded ways of asserting yourself, asserting your boundaries, and practice saying no. Because one of the most important things is that with people of color and different cultures and all that kind of stuff, we don't get to say no very often, right? So you have to actually practice how to say no in a way that doesn't offend someone. I'll give you an example. My grandma, and I love her to death, rest her soul. I wish she was still with us, but one of the things that objectively she didn't do too well was respect us when we said, no, we're full. What I figured out was, okay, if I'm full and she's still serving me, then just leave it on the dish, right? Don't eat it. Just be like, no, I'm absolutely full. This is absolutely delicious. And then what I know is my grandma, and this is why I say food is a love language, and you can overlove someone with food. My grandma would try to overfeed me, and I started to understand how to say no to her, how to say, like, I've had enough, or, all that kind of stuff, because I saw what she would do if we would gain a little bit of weight. She would simultaneously overfeed us, but then complain that we're gaining weight at the same time, right? So that's unfortunate. That's a very uncomfortable situation, because obviously, but when you're dealing with elders and all that kind of stuff, especially in these different cultural contexts, you want to be respectful, but you want to say no in a good way. So one of the most important things about the wedding season is knowing how to respond to people. And this is where I will say, like, hey, understand more of your culture, understand more of yourself, the culture you grew up in, and why that is, diametrically opposed sometimes, and how you can actually make sense of that, right? In North American culture, it's like not okay to body shame. It's not okay to do all these kind of things. But when you look at Chinese culture, which I belong to as well, I'm not saying it's okay, but it's socially accepted that someone's body shamed, or their body is brought up to conversation, all that kind of stuff. So, it's a challenge for a lot of people, and you gotta be well aware of the things that might occur during these kind of events. And the reason why I bring that up is to not invoke anxiety, but to be prepared for those kind of situations if they happen. If they don't, absolutely great, everything's fine, wonderful, just enjoy yourself. However, if they do, knowing how to say no, knowing how to not deflect, but knowing how to say something without offending anyone, and knowing that it's going to do that is very, very, very important. Rose has got a comment here. African American, Southeast Asian families have the same body comments and lack boundaries of culture. For me, it looks a lot like turning shame around. Did you hear me? Yeah, absolutely. It's not exclusive to Chinese culture, but it's exclusive to a lot of immigrant experiences and all that kind of stuff, right? One thing is, you can't expect people to be perfect, especially if they didn't live in that situation, to have that ability to be like, oh, this is how it makes other people feel and all that kind of stuff, right? The best example is like my mom will make a lot of comments now that I'll be like, oh, you're gaslighting me. And she doesn't know what gaslighting is. She didn't grow up around that time. So in those kind of situations, I've understood with more empathy that I'm like, hey, she's not trying to gaslight me. She's not trying to make me feel crazy. She's trying to get the best outcome for us. And sometimes she misses steps along the way. And I've had to learn how to accept that and learn how to communicate around that in a better way, right? I'll ask, like, did you mean this? Did you mean this? All that kind of stuff. And it's very, very, very important because, of course, especially if you grew up in a culture that wasn't the culture that you immigrated from, these are very unique challenges. And one of the best things I say to people all the time is it's best to have some scripted responses on how to assert yourself, draw that boundary, draw that line to be like, hey, we're not talking about my body right now. We're not doing this. We're not doing this. We're not making me feel uncomfortable, right? Because one of the biggest things I will say to people is that it's not okay to expect people to behave the way that you expect them to. You can only control yourself, and you can only control the things that you do and how you respond and how you react to things. So if you know you're in these high volatile situations where body shaming might be a thing, then have some ways to be able to respond to it assertively, but not to offend anyone, to bring more issues to you and all that kind of stuff. Either way, it's Rose. I see you're identifying with a lot of what I'm saying, so I'm glad that you're identifying with that too. Either way, I've got to take a bite of this because it's starting to get cold, and do the thing where I convince you that I'm a good cook. But yeah, I'm convinced you that I'm a good cook. Oh, that's funny. But like I said, this is one of those dishes that is kind of weird because you mix it up at the table or at the meal itself instead of it being mixed around for you. Now, when I'm cooking for myself, usually when I'm not taking photos of it, I will pre-mix it at the in the kitchen before I sit down with it, because at the end of the day you're gonna mix it up anyway, so pre-mix it in the kitchen where it's going to be a little bit easier to do that, so that it's going to be tasty. But this is the dan dan bean. This is one of my favorite meals. It's a very, very good comfort meal for me. It's a great way to use peanut butter in a different way, introducing a lot of different Chinese flavors in it, all that kind of stuff. I'm a big fan of this dish. Haven't made it in a while. There's a lot of reason behind that I don't want to go into, but it's the first time I'm actually having this dish in a very, very long time. So emotionally significant for me. Let's have a taste. Oh yeah, look at that. The flavors are so heavy. The peanut butter really carries the flavors a lot. A lot of these flavors are fat soluble, so having peanut butter be the base of everything, you don't taste what it is. Like, I'm just using Kraft peanut butter right now, just regular Kraft stuff, and you don't taste the Kraft sweetness of it. You just taste like this nice, creamy, nutty kind of mixture that goes very, very well with the mala spice and the pickled mustard greens that are in the pork. Again, one of my favorite meals to make because it's so full of flavor, so delicious, and it was genuinely one of the more affordable meals that you can have, right? So just helping people out there with their nutrition, saving money, yada yada, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, this is why these vegetables don't need any kind of seasoning or any sauce or anything like that, because it will just soak up so much of the flavor that's coming in the sauce that we made here. So anyways, that's it for tonight. I'm going to eat this off stream, or finish it off stream. Hope you enjoyed today's stream. Again, to my cousin, Calvin, and his fiancée, soon-to-be wife, this weekend. Congratulations. I cannot wait to see the both of you. Cannot wait to see Yvonne, you at family events much, much more frequently and often and all that kind of stuff. Welcome to the family. Super excited to be in a wedding environment. And if you follow me on Instagram, I will be posting about the food that we're eating at the wedding, because I think it's cool to share what my culture does with food and help people understand that, you know, especially with a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of people that go like, Chinese food is very unhealthy, yada yada, all that kind of stuff. And if you're basing that assessment on takeout Chinese food, where it is basically the McDonald's of Chinese food, then you're wrong. You're just ultimately so wrong. And I will have to take, I'll have to actually create some content about the history of Chinese food in North America, and how the hatred of certain ingredients like MSG has been foundationally a racist thing that is still pervasive to this day. Like, there's so many dietitians that will still be like, hey, MSG is bad for you, even though there's not a lick of evidence that says that it is. It's just so delicious, it's so flavorful, all that kind of stuff. I don't know why people hate flavor. So, you know, me and Uncle Roger one day are going to be like cooking up a storm, and we're going to talk about MSG, the history of it, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully, if I can get to be that big of a content creator, then absolutely hoping to collab with Nigel Ng. Great. I'm a big fan of his. So either way, thank you very, very much for watching today. I hope you all got something out of today's stream. Please like, please subscribe, please hit the notification icon, do that kind of thing. Again, the goal of this stream is to open up access to nutrition to the general population and all that kind of stuff. I've got something special planned for the month of August, and in July, but we're gonna pay attention to that when it comes there. So thank you all again for watching. Stay tuned. There's a lot more being developed in this mind over here for this stream and what I'm gonna do for it. But please like, please subscribe. Thank you so much for the engagement, Rose. Awesome to see you here, and awesome that you have your YouTube account now. All right, I'm going to get going now. I'm going to clean up, and I will see you all next week. Peace.